Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater is perhaps one of the most highly regarded video games of all time. It's a standout in a series of consistently highly reviewed video games, and is often seen as the strongest entry of the series. So how do you improve a game that is already so beloved? In this video, I want to discuss some areas of MGS3 which I feel could be improved upon after nearly 20 years of growth in the video game industry. Actually, before we get into that, let's quickly discuss what the developers shouldn't try to improve: the story, characters, and dialogue. This, for many people, is the main strength of the game. The relationships between the characters in this game, particularly with Snake and the boss, is what stays with you after completing this game. To try and rewrite it would just be disastrous. I also think the direction and editing of the cutscenes should be left untouched. I imagine it will be tempting for the developers to imitate the one-take Steadicam style which Kojima popularised in MGS5, but I just feel like some of the cinematography of MGS3 is so iconic that you could risk losing something by trying to switch up the style. However, when it comes to the gameplay, I think this is an area that could be improved. Whether you love, hate, or just think MGS5 is fine, one thing that I think no one denies is how smooth the gameplay was. Everything just flowed so seamlessly, such as the movement, gunplay, and most importantly, the CQC. In fact, it was so good that going back to MGS3 today feels pretty clunky in comparison. Not unplayable by any sense, but certainly of the era. Being an old school MGS fan, I do still find it quite easy to control myself, but for newcomers it will definitely feel awkward and could potentially ruin the experience. In fact, one of my friends played MGS3 a few years ago and simply could not get on with the gameplay, which unfortunately tarnished the experience for him. So if the development team can find a way to inject the smoothness of MGS5's gameplay into this remake, I think it would be a welcome addition. Another area that I feel could be improved upon is the menu navigation. This has always been a serious flaw of the game for me, going back to its initial release. While I love all the different camouflages, face paint, food and healing mechanics MGS3 offered, I always found it quite immersion breaking when I would have to pause the game halfway through gameplay to navigate various menus. If we look again at MGS5, weapon and item selection was quite seamless when exploring the open world. Of course, you did have the mission prep before each operation, but it was essentially a method of adding hotkeys to the D-pad. I feel like a similar approach could be taken with the Snake Eater remake, where you're able to switch camouflage and face paint on the fly with a simple press of the D-pad. Of course, it might look a bit silly for Snake's camouflage to instantly change, but I think it's something I'd get used to very quickly. I also think that the eating and healing mechanics could also be performed during gameplay without going into a separate menu screen. Imagine seeing Snake eat the various animals you've hunted or having to heal in the middle of combat. This could add an element of immersive tension to certain encounters that weren't present before. A minor and hopefully straightforward change, which I think could have a big impact to modernise the game, would be the elimination of loading screens. While MGS3 felt like a big game at the time, today it feels more like a bunch of small areas pieced together to make a larger jigsaw puzzle, because of the loading screens between areas. It did serve as a simple way to name each area, but this could easily be done with a simple area name fading in and out during gameplay. These loading screens were obviously a byproduct of the hardware of the time, but I feel like with the power of modern consoles, it could be easy to eliminate them, making the jungle feel like one large environment with seamless transition between areas. And speaking of modern hardware, I'd like to see this remake expand a few areas of the jungle environment, but I don't just simply mean make the areas bigger, I mean adding more trees, foliage, rocks, ditches, etc. I would love to see the wildness of the jungle environment truly realised in this game, offering more ways to tackle each area, such as allowing you to climb up any tree you want to gain a vantage point over the guards, immerse yourself in muddy areas like Arnie and Predator, and scale rock formations like you could do in MGS5 at times. I think this could add an element of that variety to gameplay which MGS5 introduced, without having to make the game open world, which I think would be a mistake. But this could also serve as a way to make the game more challenging, simply by making guards harder to spot in the jungle wilderness. One part of the original game that I go back and forth on is the Codex Screen. The codec is such an iconic part of Metal Gear Solid, to the point where even people who have never played an MGS game probably know where it's from when parodied or copied in other games. However, MGS3's Codex Screen took a slightly different approach, using still pictures to illustrate the dated technology of the decade the game is set in. But I know for a lot of gamers, a separate Codex Screen can also be immersion breaking for the game. Yes, I'm not sure using the MGS5 approach of just having the audio play over the gameplay would work either, as for me, this diminished some of the drama you get out of the codec calls at times. But I do wonder if there's somewhere in between these two styles which could work. Perhaps there could be a separate Codex Screen for more important calls, but for more tutorial based calls, this could just be played during the gameplay. It's a hard one to decide, so it might just be better to leave this area untouched, but let me know what you think. So those are just some of my ideas on how I think MGS3 could be improved. I'd love to hear some of your ideas in the comments below. I know some of you will think that this game is still perfectly playable today, but I think it's important to remember that there's a lot of gamers who will be experiencing this game for the first time who didn't grow up in the PS2 era, and so will struggle to go back to the older gameplay. Unfortunately, games age very quickly, so I think a modernisation of MGS3 could truly serve the original vision of the game well, bringing new fans into this fantastic series of games. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.